Good afternoon, everyone. We're here in front of the DOE building. We are upset and we are outraged because we know that aside from the unnerving discovery of PCBs in the public, in schools in the city of New York, we know that the Department of Education has added insult to injury in the fact that they don't want to do anything about it. Estamos aquí llamando al Departamento de Educación que se dejen de su relajo. Nosotros sabemos que el tema de PCBs, la contaminación en nuestras escuelas, es algo que ya se comprobó aquí en la ciudad de Nueva York, pero el Departamento de Educación no quieren hacer los arreglos, no quieren limpiar y siguen poniendo a nuestros niños en una situación donde la salud se le puede afectar y también el progreso que ellos pueden hacer en nuestro sistema educativo se puede afectar por este problema de PCBs. We are here also because we know that PCBs are a toxic chemical or toxic caulking inside of our school buildings, schools that have been built, and I know that the New York for Public lawyers for the public interest are here today and they'll get a little more technical. But we know that these are schools that have been built between 1950 and 1978. We know that in the city of New York, we are talking about 260 schools. In the Bronx, there are over 50 schools that are affected by it. We know that our children who are potentially affected by this can have and experience neurological problems. They can experience respiratory ailments like asthma and bronchitis. We know that the Department of Education has turned a blind eye or a blind side to our calls to have these schools tested, to have our schools remediated. We've seen testing now there was a report in about, out of 9 schools, 6 of them had high levels of PCBs. One school had levels that was 2,000 times more than the legal levels that the EPA would allow. We believe that it is time that the Department of Education stops playing Russian roulette with the health of our children. We believe that it is time that DOE stops putting a price tag on the well-being and education of our children. The Chancellor and individuals and officials in this school building who are making the decision, the conscientious decision of not cleaning up our schools. We want to know whether or not they have children in the public school system. We want to know that if they do have children in the public school system, would they allow, knowing everything that they know about PCBs, about the educational system, and the problems that PCB can cause to our children, would they allow their own children to be taught in schools that have caulking with PCBs in them? I dare say that they would not. It is time that we address this problem. It is time that we come together. I want to bring up the Deputy Borough President, who in the New York State Assembly was working on this from a legislative standpoint. And we are calling again for the DOE to have a concerted effort, a plan to identify schools. We want them to clean up the schools to the levels that is acceptable to the state and the Environmental Protection Agency in the federal government. I have written a letter to Ms. Jackson, who heads the EPA. I have given recommendations in that letter, a letter that will be distributed to all of the media here today. We have given them about 6 or 7 recommendations as to what we would like to see happen here in the city of New York. It is time that we address this problem. We have with us the Deputy Borough President of the Bronx, Aurelia Greene, who can talk a little bit about how she has been working on this, not only as a New York State Assembly member, but now as the new Bronx, new Deputy Borough President of the Bronx. Deputy Borough President.
Thank you and good morning. I'm here to support the legislation that has been introduced in the New York State Assembly by Linda Rosenthal, Assemblywoman from Manhattan. The bill number is 7556 in the Assembly. and it's also being sponsored by Mr. Kruger in the Senate. This bill would just call for the Department of Education to do a testing of the schools that were built during the period that this problem emerged, and to do a study of what the PCB level is in those schools, to report that back to the state so that a final report can be generated and corrections can be made in those schools. The bill also calls for those schools to also be, the problems in those schools to be corrected. There are standards that have been established by the state, and we're calling for the Department of Education to follow those standards so that the schools will be able to be toxic-free and the children will be able to live healthy lives in those schools. There have been instances where these toxins have been reported in schools, and you'll hear more about that. I also want to allude to the federal bill that has been passed by Congress. It has also been, it's in the Senate, in the Health Department of the Senate, but the House has already passed the bill. And it has a piece on it, an additional piece sponsored by Congressman Crowley and Serrano, that's calling for PCB cleanups, and it's providing the monies so that the schools can be cleaned up. There is no reason that we should be couching this issue. It's a matter that we must bring to the fore. That's the purpose of this press conference, for the public to know exactly what the problems are in these schools, why so many of our children are suffering with so many diseases that they don't need to be suffering with. And I thank you for having this press conference today.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Borough.